Alright, so here we are with 1-6, and this is our day 2 notes. So we're going to enter into a little bit more of a fraction idea. So our objective today is to solve a formula for a given variable and solve an equation in 2 or more variables for one of those variables. So again, isolating whatever it is that they tell us to. So in our previous notes, we looked at this chart as well. So we're solving for a variable, and we're going to do step 1, which is locate the variable. So that's when I usually make it a different color or something to kind of say this is what we're looking for, to be alone. And then step 2 wants you to identify the operations on this variable, because once you identify what's happening to the variable, in whatever order it would be if we were going to evaluate, then you're going to do step 3, which is do all of those steps but reversed, so that we can solve. Alright, so the next piece here is solving for a variable. So we're going to divide by a fraction, and note that when we divide by a fraction, it's the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. So for instance, if we have 2/3 x equals 5, what you would do is multiply instead of divide. You could divide by 2/3. The problem is that you can't do that by hand, and so you actually realize that you can multiply instead by the flip of the fraction, or what they call the reciprocal. And once you do that, you end up being able to do this by hand. So 5 is technically over 1, and so you would end up doing 5 times 3, which is 15, and 1 times 2, which is 2. And then that would be your x, 15 halves. So on that note, we have the formula for the area of a triangle. It's a half base times height. They have other formulas that you can use for an area of a triangle as well. Maybe you've heard of 0.5 base times height, or base times height divided by 2. But either way, they've chosen to do a half base height, of course, because now you have the fraction. So the formula for the area of a triangle, again, is given as this formula here, and they want h to be isolated. So we've got the area is a half times the base, and then times the height. So we're trying to get the height by itself, so maybe the easier way to, I think we'll start with a fraction just because it's easier for my brain. So I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal of 1/2. So I'm going to multiply by 2 over 1. Technically, I'm multiplying by 2 over 1 to the 1/2. But because I can't, I guess I can kind of sneak it in there. So that you can see that I'm not going to really do it to the h or the b. I'm doing it to undo the half. And then over here to the a for area, we're going to multiply by 2 over 1 as well. So, on that note, remember that anything is technically over 1. And so we're going to multiply 2 times a, which is 2a, and then technically that's over 1. But it turns out that we don't really need the over 1 if we're simplifying that left side. And then that's going to equal the half, which is canceled, so just the b and the h. And so now, in order to get that b away from the h, we're going to undo multiplying by b, which means we'll divide by b. And so we're left with 2a over b is equal to h. Taking a look at a comparison here, notice that the 2 used to be in a denominator, now it's in the numerator, so that flipped. The b used to be multiplied, and now it's divided, so that flipped. So a lot of times you can kind of check yourself in a quick way by just looking for the opposite operation. Alright, the next piece here, we have a very large fraction, but of course fractions are really just division, and so to undo, for instance, this fraction with a denominator of m, we would undo that by multiplying by m. So, in this problem, they want you to take this formula for a person's typing speed. They tell you what all of the letters mean, that's great, but really we just need to know that we're solving for e. So as we rewrite this, our e is going to be the thing that's trying to be isolated. And so we have s equals w minus 10e over m. officially, I'm going to do that set of steps where we identify what's happening to E. So for instance, let's say I put in a 4 for E. I would take that and multiply by 10 first. And then I would end up doing something with the W minus, and then I would end up doing something with dividing by M. So what we're going to do is all of this backwards, because again, we're solving. So that means to both sides, I'm going to multiply by M. Technically, we can just say that we're multiplying this whole numerator by M. And so in that case, we do cancel the M's. So we have M and a S, and that's going to equal W minus 10E. Then we have this W and this minus, and it's actually going to be 2 steps. The first step is the fact that this is plus W. I know it looks like it's minus W, but this is positive. So to undo a positive W, we're going to subtract W. If you subtract W, you get MS minus W. And then these cancel to leave you with negative 10E. And so instead of saying multiplying by 10, we're actually going to change this to have been add a W and this to be a negative 10. So if I multiply by a negative 10, which is what's happening, I'm going to need to divide by a negative 10. And remember that this could be given in 2 parts, so you could say the MS divided by negative 10 and the negative W divided by negative 10, or you can keep it all as 1 unit. So that means that E is finally all by itself, and what's left over is an M times an S minus W divided by negative 10. And that is your rewritten version. So if order of operations worked well for you, this is kind of the next step to that, okay? And so if order of operations didn't go so well, you might want to think of this as numbers versus letters, because then it would give you a little bit more practice. We also have a little lesson quiz here. So we're going to take our time to rewrite these so that they are, in this case, H equals or M or C. So we're isolating those variables. So taking a look at the first one, notice we have a fraction, so I am going to multiply both sides of the fraction by that opposite variable. So I'll rewrite it over here so I have more work space. And of course the H is the thing we're solving for. So I'm going to multiply both sides, and I'm going to do it in here by 3 over 1. Kind of getting rid of those numbers if you can. It's all multiplying, so it doesn't actually matter what order we're doing it in. Then we have 3v, and that's going to equal a times h. And of course, since it's a times h, we're going to undo by dividing by that a. So in that case, we'll have 3v divided by a is going to equal our h, or our height, I assume. Alright, then we have number 4, and we're trying to solve for m, so notice that something is happening to that m. It's being divided by x, so we need to undo that. So to undo dividing by x, I'm going to multiply by x to both sides. And so this is the entire unit multiplied by x. So there's 2 ways that we can write this. We'll have our m all by itself, but then that's either going to equal x times k minus 6. Notice that I put it in front. Usually distribution happens from the front versus behind, but you could have written it as k minus 6 times x as well. And then the last piece is that technically this x is being distributed into all of these pieces. So you could instead have an m wow, my pen is doing great things today, equal to kx minus 6x if you distributed it in. So all of those happen to be a perfectly fine example of the answer. I probably would just pick that first one because I don't like to make things longer if they don't need to be. Alright, then the last one is going to be solving for c. So again, I'm trying to get everything away from the c. First thing that's happening to the c is that it's being subtracted by s, and then the second thing that would happen if we're evaluating would be dividing by t. So we're just going to do those steps backwards. So I'm going to take that division of t and multiply by t instead. So this whole unit is going to be multiplied by t. T's cancel, and so we're left with t times r equal to c minus s. If you want to, you can keep those parentheses around the c minus s, but because there's nothing outside of those parentheses, they're really unnecessary. It's like writing a 2 with parentheses around it. Doesn't really change it. Alright, so then we have a subtracting s, and so we have to undo that by adding s. And so now we're going to end up with our c all by itself. Our s's cancel, and so it's going to equal t times r. Whoops, didn't leave enough room. T times r plus s. You can also have r times t plus s. Doesn't matter which way. Again, multiplication is what we call commutative, meaning you can flip it around. So, alright, so those are a few of our examples of, again, a lot more fractions and the fact that we're going to be using those on our assignment.